How's it going, people? Welcome back to the Supporters Club. If you haven't already, go over to my channel, Turkish LDN TV. The link is in the description below, and subscribe to me on there. And go over to Instagram and Twitter, Turkish LDN, and follow me on those social media channels. Obviously, we've come off a positive transfer window for once and an away win to Newcastle to start the season off. I've brought some guests along, Deluded.
Thanks for having me, man.
Jordan back.
Yo.
And Mo. It's been a while, but it's good to see you again.
Cheers, bro.
The team news yesterday, obviously, let's start first and foremost with that. It was a bit of a surprise. A few of the new boys were on the bench. Jordan, let's start with you. What did you think when the team lineup was out?
Slightly underwhelmed, but only because I wanted to see Ceballos in the starting 11 and also Pepe as well. But I get the practical reasons for not starting those players. The only decision I think was maybe really threw me was Callum Chambers starting ahead of Say and Louise, for example. But he ended up playing really well. I'm not the biggest Chambers fan, but I thought he played really well. So yeah, I think overall the team sheet was a little bit underwhelming, but I think Emery did what he had to do.
Yeah, so the main standout was David Luiz not starting, because I'd agree with that. I think in hindsight, when I first saw the team, I was like, I wanted to see a Ceballos, I wanted to see a Pepe or Laka in the squad. It wasn't to be. But when I'm looking back at the game, I think the only standout for me that I really expected to see would have been Luiz. The reason being because he's the experienced defender we brought in. And with our defensive frailties, I thought it would have made sense to put the new guy in. Mo, how did you feel about the starting lineup?
Yeah, I think, during the season, it's much easier to predict what the lineup's going to be game to game. You can basically get 9, 10 out of 11 right. But start the season's always a bit more difficult because you don't know exactly who's been playing week in, week out, who's in good form, who's in good fitness. So I wasn't expecting it to be as kind of obvious as I think maybe some other fans. I do agree that I was expecting Luis to start, no reason why not. But I think it's very often that you see a new signing when they're coming from a different country not getting put into the team straight away. I don't know why managers decide to do that, but it didn't surprise me at all that Pepe wasn't starting or Ceballos wasn't starting. So yeah, I was expecting there to be a bit of conversation around the lineup, and because of that I wasn't too bothered. But Chambers, as you said, he was the one surprise, but he was brilliant. So Emery called it right. Yeah,
and obviously we had the young Arsenal lads, Joe Willock and Reece Nelson starting first game of the 19-20 season, which is good to see. Obviously we're all behind the youth, we're all behind nurturing some good talent once again at Arsenal Football Club. Deluded, I know you do a lot of work around the youth players, not only at Arsenal but across European and world football. So you've probably seen a lot more of Joe Willock and Reece Nelson over the years. Obviously we've got Bukayo Saka as well, we've got Martinelli, we've got Guendouzi, we've got a nice core of good young players, Saliba coming in next summer. But focusing on Willock and Reece Nelson now, do you see them making it at Arsenal Football Club?
Well, personally I do. It depends what you talk about making it. I can't speak for no other fan. You typically know when young players come through, or young players in general, people want them to be the next Jadon Sancho or this standout star, and not everybody has to do that. Some people can just be competent individuals, to which I believe Nelson and Joe will be. They're still developing. You saw probably around the 60th minute mark when they came off, they were blowing. They're still trying to get that sort of play in 2 weeks, 3 times in 10 days into their system. But I think they've done well. I think with Joe, it shows you how with young players, patience can be overstated, but it's very underrated. Because 12 months ago, some fans that are singing his name and praising him to high heavens were saying he wasn't good enough. He looks physically better. He looks more than the physical development. He's got the bravado. He's got the aura. He looks like he belongs on the same pitch with some of these stars he probably played on FIFA with. So I think he done well. I don't think it was necessarily a perfect performance by our whole team generally, but I think in terms of repaying the manager's faith, he got his chance in pre-season and he worked to play against Newcastle and he did well. I think with Nelson, I think Nelson's a very exciting player. I think at times, of course, he's going to be frustrating. His end product isn't quite of the level yet, but I'm prepared to persist with him and whatnot, because I do think there's a player there. I did think he could have took men on a bit more yesterday, but his link-up play was good. I like how he came off the left-hand side and wanted to get in and play them little intricate passes and things, and I think they can both develop into top players. Emery more or less alluded to it in that they will get chances, but they'll probably be on the bench and rotating and whatnot, and that's all these young players want, an opportunity. Against Burnley, we didn't see a number of players start, so I do think we'll see the Pepes, the Luizes, etc. But in terms of just repaying the manager's faith, Joe Willock, Nelson, they have to be in contention for that game now, because they've deserved their spots. I know Chambers isn't technically classed as a young player, but you could throw him into that mix as well. So it was a brave decision by Emery to play them. I mean, there's still question marks over either. If we didn't have the best of games, then people would have probably looked at them. So I think they done all right. They came through it, and it's ironic because you remember the last time Joe Willock played at Newcastle away, people and fans were saying he's this, that, and the other, and it just shows how fickle football is.
That was actually against Newcastle, and Ian Wright came out with a video.
Exactly, and there's that clown on AFTV as well saying Joe and this and that. It just comes to show when you give people time.
I think the point you make about him having the best pre-season, I think of all of our players, bang aside, I think he was our best player in pre-season. And I like the fact that Emery has rewarded him with a starting position. In the same way, last year, I think our best player was Guendouzi in pre-season, and he started the season as well. He came from nowhere. We bought him, and he was meant to be like a prospect in and out. He started the season. So I like the fact that Emery seems to be saying to these young players, if you do the thing, you're going to play, and I will back you and I will support you. I didn't think Nelson was as good as a lot of Arsenal fans are saying he was yesterday. Personally, I would have liked him to be a little bit more braver. It's his first game of the season, so I'll give him a little bit of slack. But I don't think he was as good as a lot of people were saying he was. I was impressed with Joe Willock, though. I thought he was very, very lively. I thought he got involved. I thought his distribution was good without being great. And I thought for a first game of the season, I thought he held his own. I was impressed.
Yeah, no, to be honest, as Arsenal fans, speaking from my perspective, like what you said about 12 months ago, a lot of people would have been down Willock's neck and the youth player's neck. I've got to hold my hands up to that. I've lost my patience with Arsenal in a sense, and that has translated to youth players as well. So over the years, I've been as critical of them as I have been of the first team players. But look, in hindsight, that was wrong. And now I'm looking at the squad now, and we're bringing in young talent from Martinelli, Guendouzi, Saliba, good European talent or South American talent. It's good to see Reece Nelson standing out. It's good to see Joe Willock standing out. And now it reminds me of an era where I started supporting Arsenal Football Club, and it was boys and men who loved the club. And Reece Nelson's comments over the summer saying that he wants to start for Arsenal Football Club, he wants to become a first team regular. That's the sort of attitude I want to see. It's not all about quality. It's not all about the Jadon Sanchos of the world or the Kylian Mbappes.
But then that can go too far the other way, i.e. Carl Jenkinson. It's all well and good having these players that love the club, want to play for the club.
Hence why I lost my patience.
There you go.
Because of people like Jenkinson. Do you know what I mean? Over the years, me included, I was the biggest Jack Wilshere fan. Biggest. I thought he was the next thing up from my youth system. And it was a big letdown. And our youth system has let us down incredibly over the last 10 years. When you look back over the last 10 years, we haven't produced any talent near the quality we was producing the previous 10.
You say that, but with youth systems, there's an argument for it. Certain clubs don't even have academies, and the thing is with academies, do they pay for themselves, yes or no? And if they pay for themselves, then it's worth doing because you might get a gem, you know, and you get that.
Which Arsenal does.
Yeah, and I personally, I love seeing young players through our academy coming and playing for the first team and excelling. There's nothing like it. If you give me £100 million signing or an academy player winning the golden boot for us, for me it's always the academy player. I think there's a real beauty to it. For me, that's what football's about. It's not about money, it's about coaching, it's about development. And we've just sold Alex Iwobi for our club record transfer fee. So for me, the Arsenal Academy, it is paying for itself. It is working, and I'm really excited about this little batch of youngsters that we've got right now. And with Reece Nelson and Joe Willock, you know, in the game against Newcastle, I don't think if they were established professionals who have been playing in the first team for 5 years, I don't think if they played that game yesterday, they'd be happy or we'd be happy. But I think they're on track. And given that they're academy players, I think it's important that we get behind them because for me, Iwobi's gone, and I've always said about Iwobi, he never got the affection that he should have got. He never got the support that he should have got from Arsenal fans. And I just hope that this new batch of youngsters do get that affection. You know, I know it sounds a bit silly, we're not important people, but we do have a platform on AFTV after games and that sort of stuff. And I think personally we should be seen to be taking the pressure away from them a little bit. I'm not going to judge Mkhitaryan on the same page as I'm going to judge Reece Nelson. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's important that we remember that at times.
And that at times last season, that's exactly what I did, especially regarding Iwobi. At times I was critical of him as I was with Mkhitaryan. I remember a comment I made regarding Iwobi last season that he'll never make it at Arsenal Football Club. Do I regret those words? Yeah. Do I agree with them? It's the way I put it that I disagree with, because you should get behind the youth players. Now he's moved on, and we've seen Mickey's performance against Newcastle.
You want him back now?
A few of us are thinking, it won't be late. Do you know what I mean? But it is what it is. Now we've got this new core. Now we've moved on from the Wenger era. Now we're seeing a new shape and structure to Arsenal Football Club and a positive transfer window for once. Is the future bright, Jordan?
Yes, I think it is. I think there's still a lot of work to do, but yes, it is bright. What I like about our current crop of youngsters, and this might sound a little bit backwards, is, in my opinion, there's no one standout player. Sometimes you get a crop and you're like, they're good, but he's the one that's going to get poached in a few years' time. There's no one in those players that you think he's going to like.
Yeah.
They're all good, and that allows, I think, time for them to develop without the attention and the pressure of having to deliver now. Phil Foden at Manchester City, for example, is an example of someone that there's so much pressure on him to break into that team, and that could break him. Do you know what I mean? We haven't got that kind of one standout player. We've got lots of good prospects that can all come through and do well. The future is bright. The structure of the club seems to be better in terms of a plan. My big thing has always, my thing's always been a plan. It might be the wrong plan. It might not work out, but there's a plan, and that's all I've asked for from the get-go. We've got a bit of foresight with Saliba coming in next season. I like him. From what I've seen of him, I really like him. I like the fact the club are prepared to send him back for a year, to get another year under your belt. I know the terms of the club were that we'll only send him to you for that fee if we can keep him for another year. But that's forward planning for me.
I guess a lot of clubs turn their nose at that idea of giving him back for the year, because in the end we've run out the winners. So I guess there must be something there in him. Now, Deluded, have you looked at Saliba and
I like Saliba. I think similar to Reece Nelson and Joe Willock, I feel when he does come next season, I feel we need to have patience. Obviously, he's gone for an extra year. That's a bit more of experience. Experience cannot be overstated. But if you look at his career appearances at this moment in speaking, you're barely touching I don't even think he's made 30.
17, I think.
He's 17 appearances. That shows he's going to be raw. He's going to be naive. Like, even if you saw him against, who was it in pre-season? I believe Newcastle. Obviously, it's only pre-season, but he showed his naiveties against Joe Linton. I think Arsenal fans were crying out for a centre-half. We're crying out for top centre-halves. Yes, we brought one in. We need to just be patient and don't put him at a pedestal that he's not, because that might have been I'm not saying that's why the club let him go for a year, but we know we needed a centre-half so badly, and this young 18-year-old lad could have come this year. He could have been in there. He could have had a shocker against Newcastle. People would have said this, that and the other. He could have been amazing. And then what happens against Burnley? That's why I think fans need to be patient, because Nelson, he's got, 36, 37 career appearances. Joe Willock against Newcastle, that was his third Premier League start. We need to be patient, because they're going to be great one week, mediocre the next, and so the other, and then good again. 10 games, we don't know what we're going to get from these lads. It's good that they're getting chances, and consistency and them things there is what's going to make the difference, but they're still developing that. You can't get experience until you get experience, so we're going to need them to go through tough periods. Even if Saliba was here, would he necessarily grow as a player? I don't want players to have bad games, but would he grow as a player if everything went right for him? Adversity helps us a lot.
And on that point as well, it's a failing of Arsenal in the last decade is having really talented youngsters, your Wiltshires, your Ramseys, your
people
Gibbs,
around them.
but there's no leadership next to them. So your Ramsey's playing more games than he should at a young age. Theo's playing more games than he should, and the pressure's on them, and then they just they dissipate. They just blow away. If we can put over the next 12 to 24 months some senior pros next to these guys who we think are going to be hot prospects, that is when, as a football team, you develop. Let's not throw these youngsters in next season and say, right, there you go, there's 7 out of 11 players, all young players, and then they get battered and then they break. You need to put them in with, Saliba's got to come in next year with a Socrates or with an experienced centre-back next to him. Emil Rose-Smith next year, I want to see him kick on, but he's got to have people around him that have been there, done it, and know what they're doing.
Just facilitate their success in the best possible way.
I really agree. I think that's 100%. So important, because, we could have hastened Saliba's entry into Arsenal, or even paid a little bit more money to get him this season. But what the real risk with that is, in such a ridiculously average defence that we've got right now, if he doesn't start off well, that can really derail his career. So I think timing is very important. And when Emery needs to fix our defence this year, I don't think you should be pinning that job on fixing a defence like Arsenal's on a young kid with minimal
or on one individual in general.
But if that individual, say for example you pay 80 million for Harry Maguire, then that's the sort of money. I'm not saying Harry Maguire is an elite defender, but I'm just saying when you're spending that sort of money on a player that's used to the league and is a England international, and he's got that experience playing in World Cups, that sort of thing. If you're going to give someone that job, it's someone of that stature or that experience. Saliba's not that person yet. So I'm actually, in a way, maybe it's a blessing in disguise for him that, you know, you're not coming in when the defence is problematic. Let's bring him in when, as Jordan, you're saying, you've got someone decent to play with. That might be David Luiz, it might be Socrates.
When I look at the defence, it's different into other areas for me. I don't believe you can chuck a teenager into a defence in the Premier League. Like, attacking-wise, you can get away with it. But defensively, I believe you chuck in a teenager, even next summer, I wouldn't chuck Saliba in. You can't chuck a 19-year-old into a Premier League back four or back five and expect, because when he faces an Aguero, and if Aguero rips him a new one, that his confidence could be torn to shreds. And
that's
this happened with Senderos and Drogba. Senderos was a good defender with potential coming up. As soon as he faced Drogba, his career at Arsenal was done.
I see your point, but look at Tony Adams. He was Arsenal captain as a teenager. There are some exceptional players that you can do it with, but I think they're one in a generation sort of players. On the whole, I don't think there's a real strong track record of teenage defenders coming in and just hitting the ground running and excelling. So I see your point, but you know, if you're good enough, you're old enough.
So you lead me on to the next point, basically. We've got a good core young talent in the squad. Moving into January, or moving into next summer especially, is it about adding, like Jordan said, the experience, the big money signing to lead these youngsters, or would you like to go the Chelsea route of keep on getting these youngsters in every summer, potentially loaning some out and getting the best of the European young talent in and focusing on areas like that?
I'd say it's a bit of both, because on one hand, you want experience. We've spoken about experience. You want people to be guided. But I do think, like I said earlier, players cannot get experience without giving the opportunity for experience. There's no way around it. Saliba, if he was to come tomorrow next season, he is going to have bad games. That's going to make him stronger. We've said with the rest. So I do believe in allowing these players to get immediate experience, because if you look at under 23s football, I could be a defender. I lose the ball at 23s football because I see it week in, week out. You don't immediately learn. If Saliba does that in the Premier League, it's going to be all plastered over social media. His manager might be on his back, he might sit out. These are the things the players are going to have to go through. I do think the whole loan system thing with young players is very subjective. I don't think there's one single blanket you can throw over a young player, because Joe Willock's a player. I think if he went out on loan, I think he'd show his best, but would he necessarily be here? Iwobi, he's not necessarily prolific, so if he went out on loan, would he necessarily have been given a chance? So I do think it's a bit of both. In an ideal world, just to harp on about defensively, a point I wanted to make, I think I would have no issues throwing Saliba in, having good games and bad games and whatnot next season. But for me, with the next 12 months, it's about getting the system away from Saliba. It's about, if I'm a right back, I know I need to cover, left back cover, and etc. Because it should be a thing where whoever, within reason, whoever is in that defence, you don't really see a drop off. Everybody is aware of stuff. And that's where it goes into being proactive and not reactive. We praise a lot of defenders in today's football for making slide tackles and things. We don't praise someone because we don't always necessarily see it, of reading that situation, being there before it's happened and blocked it out. We know that's not glamorous, that's not going to sell papers, slide tackles are. But I think that's what I believe really.
Now, you make a good point, because potentially we could sit here in May, Tierney could have had a great season, Bellerin could have returned back, had a great season, Socrates, Luiz, Chambers and Holding have been solid. And then Saliba comes into a pretty good defensive structure. And that way I'd be a lot more comfortable with it. I keep on thinking of the Arsenal defences in the years gone by.
Definitely don't just
putting a
throw
19-year-old into that defence is madness to me. But we'll see how this year goes. Obviously, even last year, Emery, I don't believe we conceded a headed goal until April last season, which was an improvement. We conceded a hell of a lot of goals, but when you look at and delve into it a bit more, we didn't concede a goal from a corner or a set piece until April. And years gone past, that is an improvement made. Do you know what I mean? So hopefully Emery can continue that improvement. But again, it leads me on to the next point. We're talking about the future here. We've all agreed that it does look bright. Mo, is Emery the right man?
Too soon to judge. I'll be honest with you. You know, I always say, even with a player, never mind a manager, the first season's free. If you're already being transferred from within the league, then it doesn't really apply. But to get used to Premier League football is very difficult. Even, for example, with Emery, he's never even managed a squad that hasn't had a winter break before. Even that, in terms of squad rotation, how to manage your players and make sure they don't get injured and that sort of stuff, is very difficult. And I think he made some strange decisions last year. He seemed to put all of his eggs in one basket in the Europa League. And neglected some of the Premier League games, and we were sitting there thinking, we're not used to this. We're experienced fans, you know what I mean? We know when Palace turn up, they're not just going to lie down, they're going to want to win, you know, and it's different in this league. So now I think, you know, it's a little bit too soon to answer that question, because At this stage, I'd say no, but it's really not about what he's done so far. It's about whether he learns the lessons off the back of what he's done so far. So give it the first half of this second season, and then I think we'll be better placed to kind of say that.
I'm going to ask you a question. When you say, is he the guy to do the job, what is the job?
Top four, isn't it?
The job first and foremost is to bring a structure back to the team.
Okay.
We've got the structure above him now. We've got that sorted in the summer. We spent a bit of money in the window. I believe we could have done a bit more. I've given the window 7.5 out of 10 because we could have been a bit more proactive and we could have spent the money on a centre back. When you see our net spend, we could have taken more of a risk and spent a bit more money. People are going to shout FFP, but you spend 50 mil more, you get into Champions League. That cancels it out. People think you can't spend it because of FFP. No, you can spend it. It's the no risk, no reward factor. You spend the 50 mil, this summer you get the Champions League football, it bears dividends. But with Unai Emery, he needs to bring the structure back first, and that's defensively. I think playing out the back, against Newcastle, I feel like they should know better by now. We're a year in. What I'll give the benefit of the doubt is that I believe Kolasinac would have started that game, and I believe the shape would have been a bit different. So 2 days before the game going in, I don't believe Monreal has been training as a left back this summer. I think Kolasinac and Tierney are our left back. So Monreal got chucked in as the left back. I'm sure he's been training this summer as a centre back. So the playing out the back thing, at Newcastle I wasn't impressed, and that's what I want to see more of this season.
So you say structure, which I think is fair. I would say culture. Is he the guy to change the culture of the club? Because when we first appointed
mentality
Emery,
in me as well.
Yeah, when we first appointed him, my big thing was, a lot of Arsenal fans were saying last year, on this platform, he's got to get top four. Got to get top 4. I was literally wetting myself laughing. It was ridiculous because before he changes the personnel of the club, which obviously needed to change, we still got some bad players. Before that happens, he has to un-Wengerize the team. That sounds maybe a bit harsh, but he's got to change the culture of the club, which for me is more than 1 or 2 years. So for me, when he was appointed from the get-go, I always said, I'm giving him 2 years. 2 years. I mean, most of them gave him a year free. For me, it's 2 years. Because to change the culture of the club, which is soft, which is very much embedded in being losers. Everything we do is geared towards being losers.
No, that's harsh. It's not about being losers. It's about not being winners. Everything we do isn't geared to having to be a winner.
Fair enough.
But to say to be a loser is very harsh.
Fair enough. It's not about trying to be a winner. That's fair. That for me takes more than a year. That's about instilling a culture in a club, from the tea lady to the person that lets you in the car park. Everybody's got to be on the same page of we want to be better. Pep Guardiola at Manchester City has everybody at that club, not the team, not the coaches. Everyone at the club they're all geared to, how do we win? How do we be better? And that is a culture at the club that permeates from the top right down to the bottom. Can he do that? I think he can do that, but it will take time.
But how can he do that when you're saying it permeates from the top to the bottom? Look who's at the top, and then tell me how can that happen at Arsenal?
Well, yeah, but we're just saying earlier on, the summer that we've had, we have seen some positives from the people above Emery in terms of releasing some money to give him the players and the personnel.
But it's not all money, and you know the weak hair do you movement over the summer. I really hope that hasn't died a death now because we spent £72 million on a player. This is not just about money. It's about now what are we going to do with our assets, with our resources? Yeah, we might have spent money, but that doesn't guarantee you a good culture. It doesn't guarantee you a winning culture.
Who are we? What do you what do we stand for as a football club?
And for me, I think Emery is going to be, as you say, that culture is going to be top down, unless Kroenke is really pushing that culture on everyone from the manager to the tea lady. It doesn't matter. And for me, I think, look, I hope Emery can overcome that, but I think it's a very, very difficult job because for me the culture is set top down.
But the thing is, Jordan, I actually agree with a lot of the points you make, and I probably would have said the loser mentality until Mo usually sorts out the way I word things, because he is right, you know what I mean? But what it is like 16-17 season, Deeney said we haven't got cojones, so you go kick Arsenal off the pitch and you win the game, which was facts then. It was facts. But I think since Emery's come in, he's made a little difference there even. I agree. With signings of Socrates, Kolasinac, even though he came in under Wenger, Torreira, Xhaka came in under Wenger. These men have changed that mentality. I think now we're not a soft touch in terms of kicking us off the pitch, and in tighter games, we don't collapse like we used to.
I agree, and for me, the whole kicking us off the pitch thing isn't necessarily linked to buying bigger, stronger players physically. You
Just
can be
being up for
small,
it.
but mentally you refuse to be
That's
to
Torreira.
lift the ball.
Like Bernardo Silva, City.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's about him instilling a culture in the club that says we want to be better. We want to be. Why can't we compete with Liverpool, Manchester City? Why not? But that for me is the first job he's got, and I think he can do that. Can he get us top 4? I think he can do that as well. Is he the guy to get us to win the Premier League, which is where we're going to get to eventually? That I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the question.
That I'm not sure.
That word on your T-shirt, Turkish.
Yeah.
Is he? Would you use that word to describe Emery as in the management, context?
Question mark.
Honestly, no.
That's the question mark. Yeah.
Honestly, no, not at this moment anyway.
And then the interesting thing is, at the end of this season, we all know who's available. Yeah, Allegri. He was the one that a lot of Arsenal fans wanted. And, for me, he's an elite manager. And so, if I was Emery, I'd be kind of like looking over my shoulder this season thinking, right, well, my contract's up. Let's not forget that. My contract's up at the end of this season. I need to prove that I'm worth that renewal and kind of say, yeah, I'm better than Allegri or better than Arsenal trying to go and get someone like Simeone or something like that. And he's been backed this transfer window. He's had years of experience in the Premier League. Now he needs to step up and respond. We're talking about Arsenal kind of stepping up to a new level. Emery needs to lead that himself.
So I just want to throw a scenario out there quickly and just get some opinions. Let's start with Deluded. Let's say in January we're fourth, 5 points clear in fourth position. 5 months to go on Emery's contract. The talk probably starts to come media-wise then. Do you offer him that new contract because we're doing well at that moment, or do you wait to see how the season pans out and then offer? Because you might be left in an Ole situation where you give it to him because it's going well. Come end of the season, we're out of top 4, we've got to pay him off.
See, now I believe that's a tricky decision, and I think that's one for the club and the club only. I say that because the longer it goes on, I can sit here and say the obvious, but the longer it goes on, the more it becomes a thing, the more it becomes on the papers and whatnot. I think it's up to the club. I agree.
Get off the fence. Come on, get off the fence. Come on.
I agree with a lot of what Jordan said. A lot of what Jordan said about him needing to show progression. But if we look at the bigger picture, it wasn't going to definitely change in one season. Yes, we've signed players and there's a reason to be optimistic by fans, but the defensive errors are still there. They're still going to remain there. Even if you look at Almiron, there was a set piece, no one picked him up. These are the things. Defending first. If I see the back 5 change, then certain things can change. I'm still very much in wait and see mode. It's completely up to him. If the defense, we need to start with the defense. You look at even at half time, technically Newcastle had more shots than us for the 70% possession and 300 odd passes. So that needs to change. I feel people don't talk about offensively. So first and foremost, he's got to look at himself. And I do think he's had to ask himself questions for as much as the playing staff, because he's gone from PSG to Arsenal where you can spend however much, so you can't spend anything. He's had to reinvent himself. Like Mo said, he's seen with the league and being galvanated and things like that. He's probably saw things that made him think, rah, like I didn't think this before. He's messed around with the side rightly and wrongly and got away with it, and he's not been on the fortunate side of times. So it's about learning from these mistakes. For me personally, it's all about what I am seeing. For me, to answer it shortly, I believe he should go if he doesn't get top 4. But if it was a thing where I'm seeing several things, we're improving defensively, there's more of a proactive approach in defending. Like if we were still conceding the same goals, but someone read the situation, how can I not get behind him and things like that? Ultimately, the penny would probably lead to him being out of the club, because the longer we go without top 4 Champions League football, the telling marks are going to be there. But it is a difficult one, and it's for the club really to answer. It ties into what they want to do with Emery, with Adu and everything long term moving on, because yes, if he doesn't get top 4, he should probably be moved on. But what if young players are developing? What if we are showing improvements? What if the club ultimately believe in him moving forward? He's not the oldest of managers, so there is times. For me, I do have question marks defensively and with his actual away record away from Arsenal. So there's question marks with actually how he sets up teams away from home in particular. To answer your scenario, it's a difficult one, really and truly.
I think the 2 questions to your question are: one, why do we have to make that decision in January? Why can we not just wait until?
Because of the media, we've had it with.
That's why I said it's down to the club.
The club just decide. You know what? You're doing well right now. You've got 5 months left on your contract to run. Let's just wait until the summer, and then if we feel come the summer you've achieved your objectives, we'll give you a contract.
It's an option for another year. Actually, he's got an option for another year.
Yeah, but who exercises that option? Is it the club or
Arsenal,
the manager?
I think
probably the club. Yeah, it can't be.
But you see, sorry, go on.
And the second question was going to be, can we get better than him? Can Arsenal Football Club right now get better than Unai Emery? That's the second question.
It's never
Potentially, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
Honestly, I think, yeah.
How do you
Turkish,
define better,
with
though?
your-
Because you could go out and get someone that's...
Allegri.
Yeah, okay, we can all say the obvious of getting Allegri, but what if there is a manager out there that the club have identified that we don't necessarily know? He might have the philosophy, he might tie in. Obviously, if it's an unknown, we don't know him, so we'll have question marks over it. But are you really going to tell me there's not a manager out
I'm not
there
saying
that
he
can
can't.
move it
I'm just
forward?
saying the question then becomes: if you're going to let him go,
Who's
better?
the replacement?
Who's
Yeah.
the replacement?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
When we talk, I got bored of this with Arsene Wenger because everyone was like, "Do you want Wenger in or out?" And I was like, well, "It's half a conversation. You need to know the full context of that conversation. It depends who we're getting. If we're getting Gary Neville, then no, I'd rather keep Arsene Wenger.
Of course.
If we're getting Pep Guardiola, yeah, give me Pep Guardiola, Wenger out." The point is, when that situation comes up, do we want to give him a new contract or not when there's 6 months or 5 months left of his contract? For me, if I was in charge of the club, I'd be saying to him, I can't possibly offer you a new contract because when you came in, you inherited a Europa League team. I don't know whether I have to give you a new contract for a Champions League team or a Europa League team. If you're taking the Europa League team and you're 2 years on, it's still a Europa League team and we haven't seen like a massive shift in the standard of the club and the performances of the club, your terms are going to be very, very different. If this season you're having a stellar season, the first half of this season, for example, if he's doing brilliantly and he maintains that and all of a sudden we're a Champions League team, we're fighting for the title, I'm not saying even winning the title, but if we go to the last weekend of the season fighting for the title, even as Emery, I'd be saying, well, yeah, you better up my terms. This is his time to earn that deal. And you don't do that in half a season.
Yeah.
Let's take the full season. And I get your point that, there'll be those murmurings about, is he going to give him a new contract, yes or no? That's just part and parcel of football. Every player, every manager has to deal with that. And the club just needs to take a mature, consistent approach. We'll discuss that at the end of the season. That's it.
No,
The papers can go on about it all they want. The club, same parroted answer, end of the season.
No, I agree. It's just that them scenarios can kind of take a turn for the worse when the media do start reporting negative things around contracts and players then have a decision to make, or not a decision to make, but they rest on their laurels and think, this manager's not going to be in next season, so we don't need to perform to that.
But I think what I like about the new modern Arsenal is that actually it's not the manager that's going to decide your future anymore. We've got other people that will still be there after the manager, and if they've seen that you've just taken your foot off the gas all season because you don't think the manager's going to be there next year, you're still gone.
Yeah, because Raul's got a lot of plaudits
Exactly.
this summer for
Don
the-
Raul Escobar.
And a lot of fans have been calling for that change, and finally we've got that change now. So it's not going to be up to Emery necessarily whether players are coming in or going out. He'll obviously have a say in the matter, but if Emery's not at the club next season and you've been chilling for the last 6 months of the season, you're gone.
Yeah,
But that's
no,
what leads me
it,
to
yeah.
believe that he might possibly, well, not might, I actually hope he's here, because if you look at his age, you look at Edu, fair enough, Sanye is a different sort of beast to it, but you look at these positions, Husfarmi, they've all got youth on their side, so that entices you to believe it's a long-term project. I don't think this, in an ideal world, of course we would have got top 4 last season, of course we can this year, but I honestly think the club we're looking at is where could we potentially be within 3 or 4 years. I think if the main thing Emery has to show is progress. If he's showing us defensive improvements, etc., if we miss out on top 4, well, that's fine margins and the conversation will have to be had there. But personally, I think it's what he shows. If he shows he's developing youth players, he shows he's adaptable. Because for me, my actual problem with Emery is actually how he's kind of sets up in the smaller games. I think against the top 6, there has obviously been some performances we've lost, but he's got that on lock. And I think I speak for everyone here when we feel a bit more confident in them sort of games under him. It's the smaller games. It's how we start. It's at times our start hasn't been good. We're going a goal behind. We find ourselves drawing when we need to win it. Yeah. It's about that. To be fair, Emery can only tell these players half of that. The players are the ones out there, but ultimately it's on his head. So I think, in short, it's about progress year on year, because the club appointed him. They must have been looking at 3 and 4 years and year on year progression. It wouldn't have been a thing where you're out this year, you're out that year, unless something dramatic happens, of course.
I agree, but I actually think the club, my perspective on it, I think the club offered a 2-year contract to bring back a structure into the club, and I thought at the time it would be passed on to an Henry or a Vieira, but I actually think now Youngberg will be the next in line.
That's what I believe as well.
I think because he came in last summer. He came in last summer to do the under-23s, didn't he?
Something like that.
This summer he went into assistant manager. It's like a progressive.
It's the way the football's going with managers as well.
But I still think it would be a bit too early, and also I think for Emery, only 2 years to try. Like Arsenal are a huge club. I think when you go on their tours and stuff, you realise. I was in Washington, and it's Arsenal versus Real Madrid, and I thought to myself, it's definitely going to be more Real Madrid fans. It's Real Madrid, isn't it? It was still Arsenal dominated. It's incredible how we forget how big we are. And I think it's a big old job for Emery to get us back to where we were.
agree.
I don't think 2 years is enough.
I totally agree.
But I think, Deluded, you've hit the nail on the head. It's about that progress. And the issue with progress is that we're not saying score this number of goals or get to this position in the league. It's more subjective than that.
Yeah.
And because of that, not everyone's always going to be in agreement. You know, you can't make it cutthroat. But he needs to show enough progress to get the majority of people on side, and then I think he will get that contract. And I think the crucial thing is, look, it doesn't matter who the actual man is, what his name is, where he's from. He's the Arsenal manager. He holds that title.
Yeah.
And because he holds that title, we're all behind him. We all support him. And there's no one I want to be in charge of Arsenal, leading us to glory more than Unai Emery. When it was Arsene Wenger, my answer was there's no one I want more to turn it around and give us success than Arsene Wenger. So I'm not looking at Allegri and thinking I'd prefer Allegri than Emery. I don't want to have to go through that hassle of changing managers. I want it to be Emery. We're behind him.
Yeah, because what's it to us who's really
Exactly,
there? As
it doesn't
long as
matter
they're
at
doing
all.
their job, as long as they're
your
keeping
job.
fans happy, that's the main
It
thing.
could be
But
someone that we don't even know yet. It doesn't matter who it is. Just because
Exactly.
he's the Arsenal manager, we wish
Get
him all the
behind
best.
him, yeah.
yeah, because like you just mentioned, a lot of the new school managers have come straight from football inside into management.
They're bypassing a lot. Long gone are the days where you go to League Two and whatnot and earn your stripes. People are bypassing a lot, and that's the nature we're going into. Obviously, we didn't get Arteta, but there was a lot of talk of people like that.
I think he's the next guy.
Even him. It'd probably be someone we're not speaking about somewhere, and God knows wherever right now, doing his
But
coaching
you
stuff.
know what? I think we all hope that Emery does it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
without
think
a doubt,
we want the
Emery wanted to do well,
consistency.
yeah.
I think we all hope that Emery's here for another 10 years. We get a league
Exactly.
title again. We're back in the Champions
Exactly.
League. We're back to challenging. That's ideal, and I think we can all agree that the future is bright at Arsenal
Yeah,
Football Club. Yeah,
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. But thank you for coming on, Mo. As always,
Appreciate
Jordan
it.
and
Big
Deluded.
up.
Thank you very much
You
for
might
having
say
me,
your
man.
channel quickly into that camera there.
Deluded Gooner, just type that in on YouTube, it'll all come up. Deluded Gooner 04 on Twitter. Hit me up.
Jordan, your show?
My show on Talk Sport, 9 till 10 every Thursday, and also my podcast, Football Fans Pod, on the Twitter.
And Mo, tell them about the Fantasy League I'll be winning this year.
Yeah, man. Well, so fantasy football, Arsenal Fan TV are finally doing a fantasy football league, and there's over 20,000 people in the league. And also, there's a fantasy Arsenal Fan TV regulars league as well. And I'm bottom at the moment. So I had a nightmare. So
Who's top? Who's top?
I don't know, but actually, do you know what? I think that
didn't
the
know.
people who are top,
Didn't wanna
the
know.
people who are top have got Tottenham players in the league, so their result is null and void. Because in an AFTV fantasy football league, you are not allowed any Tottenham players. I told everyone this, and certain people still put Harry Kane as captain. It's not happening.
Guilty.
I saw, no, me too. That's why I'm top of this league. You know what I mean? But listen, thanks, gents, for coming on. This has been the Supporters Club. Is the future bright for Arsenal? I think we all agree that it is here. Is Unai Emery the right man? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Turkish LDN TV.